Hi, my name is John Yunker, and I'm here to talk to you about the future best practices from the leading global websites. A little bit about me. I am co-founder of ByteLevel Research. We were founded in 2000 specifically to focus on website globalization best practices. Over the years, I've authored a number of reports and books about these best practices, including most recently, Think Outside the Country, which is available in English and in Japanese. And since 2003, I have published a report called the Web Globalization Report Card, and it is focused on what makes the best global website. This is the most recent edition, a 2021 Web Globalization Report Card. The focus of the report card is just on the leading global brands. The focus of this presentation is going to be largely directed towards large organizations, but some of the trends are coming from smaller and more nimble companies. So what I often say is that the future best practices are already here. You just need to know where to look. One place that I recommend looking is in this list of the top 25 best global websites from 2021 from the report card. Number one is Wikipedia. You see a lot of tech companies here like a Google or an Adobe, Microsoft, but you also see more consumer-oriented companies, consumer product companies like a Nestle or an IKEA. The point I want to make here is that web globalization best practices are not unique to one industry sector or one company. You have to cast a wide glance beyond your direct competitors and learn what's working and what's not working. And that's really my goal with this presentation and with the report card in general, is just looking for what's working, what's not working from a consumer's perspective. And I talked to many of the executives at these organizations to understand in detail what's working and not working. And then I use that to increasingly raise the benchmark on the metrics for the report card, and then also sharing these best practices, including what I'm going to talk about over the following slides. So let's take a look ahead at the future of the internet. So in the future, websites will speak 30 or more languages. In fact, many websites already support 30 or more languages, although most do not. And there's a reason why languages are so important. Because if you look at the number of internet users today in a pie chart, at roughly 4.5 billion internet users, their languages are significantly diverse. In fact, fewer than 20% of all internet users right now are native English speakers. When I founded ByteLevel Research, I would say that number was maybe 70% or more. So as more of the world goes online, the percentage of native English speakers continues to decline. Chinese is now the dominant language on the internet of users. But I want to draw your attention to this pie chart, this slice, the largest slice, which includes all other languages. And it's there because the slices get so small as you work your way around that I've just grouped them into this large slice. And the point here is that if you want to reach, say, 90% of or more of all internet users, you have to support a lot of languages, 30, 40, 50 plus languages, depending on your selection of languages. So just keep that in mind, that languages are a means to an end. As I often say, the internet connects computers, but it is language that connects people. And if we look at just the leading global brands from the report card, and these are very large organizations, the average number of languages has grown significantly over the past 15 years, from 12 languages to 33 today. That's a significant number of languages. However, language growth is uneven, and I've taken a semi-random selection of companies here just to show you how uneven the growth rate is. Facebook, of course, is one of, with multiple billions of users, had to invest heavily in languages to get there. And in fact, in about 18 months, they went from roughly 2 languages to over 90 languages. Most other organizations grow much more slowly. Toyota was at 40 languages in 2010, and now they're at 53 languages. Even Amazon, this global brand, very successful global company, is still, in my view, a language laggard at 18 languages. They still have a long way to go. Now that is partly the way of retail globalization, which is incredibly challenging in its own right. It has a lot of moving pieces that makes the process of going global much more difficult for an Amazon than, say, a Facebook. Even Apple is in many ways just getting started, having gone from 18 languages to 35 today. So the growth is uneven, but it continues. That is the one dominant trend since I got into studying global websites, is that language growth continues, and it will continue. And if you look at the need for languages, if I look at Wikipedia here on the right, which actually is now over 300 languages, this represents to me a bellwether website because it is driven by volunteer created content. So it represents one signal of demand for content and languages. So if we assume that globally there's a demand for 300 languages, and then you look to the left at the leading global brands at 33 languages, there's a massive gap there between what's being supported and the demand. And then I've also included emerging small to medium-sized enterprises into the mix because most websites support 10 languages or fewer. So how do we overcome this language gap? I'm going to talk about one way at the end of this presentation. India, with more than 20 official languages, is going to drive a second wave of growth across many of the companies that I study. Historically, India has been one of those markets that companies, executives in a lot of companies, let's say they were hopeful that they could get away with English only because English is the dominant second language in many parts of the country. But if you're really focused on the consumer market, and actually I would argue even the B2B market, you cannot ignore these 20 plus languages. It's not just a sign of respect, it's a sign of business, of investing in your growth and investing in your customers. And that is why Amazon is slowly but surely, notice the country code .in there, and is investing in these languages slowly, but it is, as well as Airbnb, two representative companies. This is still an emerging market from a web globalization perspective, but it is going to rapidly accelerate, in my opinion. In the future, local websites will be a lot easier to find. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, we often, I guess, when you're in the field of website development, or if you're in the field of, if you're an American in particular, you tend to view .com as the front door to your website. But in fact, .com is, for most Americans, synonymous with .us. It's viewed as the local front door. But for the rest of the world, .com is not the local front door. So a lot of users don't know where to go sometimes. And so I've created a visual here to illustrate what I'm getting at here. So on the bottom left, we have your website, your .com website. And .com is like a funnel or an international arrivals area in the airport. So you've got people, website visitors from around the world, all coming to .com. And these people may not speak English at all. So how do you make sure that you navigate them quickly to where they want to be, to the languages they speak? Now, to the right, we have country codes. We have Japan, Germany, and France. These are local front doors, and these allow people to bypass .com entirely. But .com is hugely popular. In fact, many of the multinationals I consult with tell me that anywhere between 60% and 80% of the people who arrive to .com arrive from outside of the organization's home market. So they've got a huge challenge to direct all of these visitors to where they want to go. And there are a lot of tools, visual and technical tools, that you can use to create a more positive experience. Country codes, of course, provide that local front door. I am a huge advocate for country codes. There's more than 250 of them, as seen here in a map I created years ago. And in some markets around the world, country codes are hugely important. I know a lot of Americans may not even be aware that US is .us is a country code because it's not well used. .com is often used, or .co. But if you're in France or in Canada, you're very most likely very familiar with .fr, .ca, or .de in Germany. Many markets see that these country codes carry a lot of weight in terms of credibility and trust. And if you're in the e-commerce business, you would be wise to invest in country codes. Based on the 2020 and the 2021 report cards, the majority of websites that I study are using country codes for at least one or more of their localized websites. So it is a mainstream tool nowadays. Some companies go a step beyond, like an Amazon here, and they append the country code to the logo. And it's just another way, and I think a very smart way. Expedia does it here as well. So you don't have to be it's not just about pure e-commerce. It can be about travel. It's just another way of sending the signal to your customers that you have invested in their market and you're serious about their market. And here is the local front door. It encourages users to enter these URLs directly, to go straight through the front door, removing a step, which is in their best interest and in your best interest. There's also something known as brand top-level domains, TLDs. And I have a screen grab here from Google Domains. If you look in the address window, you see domains.google. You do not see .com. Now you might think something's missing. In fact, nothing's missing because Google has registered Google, meaning instead of .com, you have .google. So companies with a lot of resources, because this is not inexpensive, this is for billion-dollar companies usually, they can pay to register their brand TLD, and they would own it and manage it as they see fit. There's a process to this. And there's a lot of opportunities that go just beyond even websites, which I'm excited to explore. And I could devote a whole nother presentation towards. But for now, I'm just going to say that this is just another way that organizations, large organizations, can manage the global and local experience from a navigational perspective. In addition to Google, we have Philips, Barclays, and Toyota that also have these top-level domains. And these are 3 live web pages at these addresses. Now, geolocation will continue to improve the discoverability of localized websites. Geolocation is the process of looking at the IP address of your device. So when you get on the internet through your phone, your computer, you're sending an IP address to a server. And that can be mapped to a location, and specifically to a region or country. And it's popular, it's well used, and Adobe does something here I think is everyone should be aware of. So if you're going to adobe.com and you're based in France, on the left you see this overlay that is in French and English that gives you the opportunity to go to the .com address or go to the france.fr website. Similarly, on the right is what a user in Spain will see. This is just for .com visitors, and this is one way you can manage all that traffic you're receiving to your .com address. But it's very smart in that it allows the visitors to retain control over where they want to go. Because many of your visitors, they may be traveling, they may be multilingual. And if they're multilingual, they might choose to go to the English site, and you shouldn't stop them. A lot of websites do redirection, and that can be tricky. So just keep this in mind. I'm in favor of always letting the user be in control of where they want to go. Now, flags have historically been quite popular for navigational purposes. I could also devote a presentation to flags and why they are tricky. This is Apple. And for years, more than a decade, Apple has used flags for navigational purposes. I'm happy to say that in the fall of last year, they removed flags. Flags, in my opinion, do not work well for navigation. They don't scale well. They don't. They present a lot of geopolitical risks. There's just a lot of issues with flags. So if you can avoid them now, please do. And if you need help removing them, making the case for removing them, contact me or go to my blog, globalbydesign.com, because that is a recurring theme. Now, in the future, websites will be faster and serverless. What do I mean? Well, first, let me present the problem. The problem is this. Too many websites are overweight. And when I look at the report card over the years, I've been weighing, and when I say weigh, I'm looking at the total amount of bytes that have to be downloaded for the web page to display. And I'm specifically looking at mobile websites here, because mobile users are often on more strained networks. And this is even in developed markets. You could be in an airport where everyone's on cellular, and suddenly a 5G doesn't feel like a 5G network. So this is not just a developed market issue, an emerging market issue. It affects all markets. So 9.4 megabytes is the average weight. That is enormous. And let's look at one website. Let's look at CNN. CNN.com weighs approximately 7 megabytes, which could take up to 7 seconds or longer to display on your mobile browser. And that's crazy. So CNN also offers a light page that is stripped of visuals and advertising at light.cnn.com. And this comes in at just 122 kilobytes, which 122 kilobytes is actually how a lot of web pages looked and loaded a decade plus ago. I'm not suggesting all websites have to look like light.cnn.com. I suggest a ceiling of 3 megabytes. Ideally 1, if you can do that, because if you can get to 1, you're competing now with Google or a Facebook, because that's what they set as a ceiling oftentimes. But if you can keep it under 3, you're most often ahead of your competitors. And this is one way you can control the performance of your website, because you're going to use caching. You're going to do all of the technical things you can do to move the website and all the content closer to the end user. But the lighter the website, the better off you are. Now, there's also something else happening, and this is more. I would say we're seeing this more with startup companies, more nimble companies, because it's a major migration, but it is happening, and it's what is often called headless content management systems, or serverless content management systems. There's a lot of different words, and this screen grab is from Netlify, which is one provider, but effectively what we're seeing is this idea that the websites are not being assembled dynamically. For example, when you visit WordPress, that page is put together on the fly dynamically. It's all being assembled, and there's latency as a result of that. I manage a number of WordPress sites, and that drives me insane because it is slow. I always struggle with that. Well, now you can do something called headless, where you continue to use WordPress or some other CMS on the back end, and then you pre-assemble these pages into static web pages. And static web pages, remember those? That's how the internet was many, many years ago. So this is kind of a best of both worlds. And I think it's really positive, not only for organizations, but for end users around the world. It doesn't mean you still can't have an overweight website, but it can, by deploying static pages, you can dramatically improve performance. And performance is a competitive asset. So in the future, websites will do a better job of supporting multilingual users. And that's an audience that is important. And there's a lot of multilingual users out there, and it'd be nice if they could set multiple language preferences like Twitter now does. So Twitter allows you to see tweets in multiple languages, and you can set preferences on what languages you speak. And that's smart because, well, Twitter being ad-based, they're learning more about what ads to serve you. So it benefits Twitter from a business perspective, but it really benefits customers and users from a content perspective, because then you can determine what tweets you want to see. And so the extent to which you can learn more about your customer base and what languages they speak and are comfortable seeing will play a key role in your content strategy. And that is, this progression we're seeing from localization to personalization. And I have a screen grab here from Amazon. Amazon also provides a lot of reviews in an increasingly diverse range of languages. And here we have English and Spanish reviews, and I could self-translate the Spanish language review if I chose to. And that's driven by machine translation, which I'm coming to. In the future, websites are going to do a much better job of managing language expectations. When I talk about managing language expectations, what I'm saying is that websites aren't going to be perfect. They're never perfect. They're always falling short in some way. And when you go global, they're going to fall short in a lot of linguistic ways, meaning you're not going to translate every bit of content into every language. I know a few websites that do. So what do you do? How do you manage the user experience when they click through and they see a link that's going to take them back to English content? How do you manage that so it's still a positive experience? And that's something we all wrestle with. How do you manage a failure in your website to load? For example, Amazon. Amazon here, they've got a multilingual fail page, if you will, a 404 page, or a scheduled maintenance page. It's static. It's not the most elegant thing. Nike has one here as well. These aren't going to win design awards necessarily. That's not the purpose. But what it does say, in a lot of different languages, it communicates what's going on to the user. You could go one step beyond, and you could do some sort of geolocated language negotiation type thing to match the user's language expectation. But let's say everything fails, and you can't even do that on your server. If nothing else, you do something like this. And it's subtle, but a lot of organizations don't think about this detail. And as you start to think about managing language expectations, you will think about these things. On Autodesk, if you go near the footer, and many places on their website, this is from Spain, you might notice little bits of text here that tell you, that say English, basically. And what Autodesk is doing is warning you that if you click on these links, you're going to go back to English content. And this is a very subtle, but very, I believe, very important and beneficial technique to alert users to click or not click based on whether they want to go to that content. And that's smart, because you're just providing, you're being a better host to your visitor. You can also use something known as language negotiation or language detection to detect the language setting of the web user's browser. And in this case, for Ford in the US, if I visit Ford.com with a browser that has Spanish as a preference, I see this overlay. So Ford is giving me the option to select Spanish. And this is a nice, subtle, valuable way to alert visitors to localized content. And that's, it's a great tragedy in my view if you invest millions, or say thousands to millions of dollars in localization, and then your customer base can't find it. So these little details really can make a difference in traffic and in overall customer experience. Finally, machine translation. It will be everywhere. In fact, it really is already everywhere, particularly in social media. On Instagram, I follow Teatro Colón, the theater in Argentina, and I can self-translate text, and it's quite good. So I use it quite a lot. And of course, Google Translate pioneered machine translation, and look at all the languages Google Translate supports. And it is by far the most popular translation tool on this planet right now. And it is changing user expectations. Of course, now Apple is doing it as well. Apple is into machine translation, and it has ways to go to catch up with Google. But every major tech company now is doing something with machine translation. So why? Well, first and foremost, your customers want content. And machine translation unlocks more content. And I mentioned Amazon in machine translation. They've been doing this. Uh, this is from Airbnb, now with Google Translate. And GoDaddy. Highlighted in purple is a little message that effectively says, I'm a robot and I've auto-translated this page. It's cute. It is an important way of managing expectations, because one thing you do have to be aware of, if you use what I call user-facing machine translation, meaning you just present it to the user, and they need to know that it's machine translation because it's not perfect. You need these disclaimers, if you will. So that is something to keep in mind. I'm not suggesting machine translation should take the place of professional translators. Not at all. They have a hugely important role to play. And in fact, they often manage machine translation and use it as part of their workflow. But machine translation has a valuable role to play in unlocking vast amounts of content that you may never have paid a professional translator to do the first pass on. So going back to this visual, how do we overcome the language gap? Well, Google Translate already is, to a large degree, at 108 plus language pairs. So keep that in mind. Machine translation is here. It continues to grow in popularity. The question is, how are you going to leverage it internally to manage your translation workflow, and externally with your customers to help them access so much more content, to have a better user experience when they visit your website. So to summarize, in the future, websites are going to support a lot more languages than they do today. Country codes and geolocation are two tools that will continue to improve the navigational experience. Performance gains will be realized through weight limits that organizations set internally, as well as the use of static serverless content management systems. Websites are going to do a much better job of supporting multilingual users, and they're going to do a much better job of managing the overall language experience, particularly in situations where there are fallbacks in terms of content and language. And one way to manage that, of course, is through machine translation. Machine translation is disruptive. It has been disrupting the web globalization space for about a decade now, and it really is just getting started. And I'm fascinated to see where it goes. And I'm fascinated to see where you all go as well with your website. So please reach out to me if you have questions. I hope to answer some Q&A after this presentation. I have a blog at Global by Design. Look me up on Twitter and check out my book, Think Outside the Country. So thanks for joining me, and I look forward to connecting with you.